Welcome back to the 55th online episode of Peacetime, hosted every Sunday morning by Peace Point with myself, Phra Nicholas Thanissaro, live streaming from our meditation centre in London. Last time you saw me, we looked at blessing number 13, cherishing our husband or wife. With the Dhamma talk today, we will move on in our series on enlightened living to the final blessing in the family harmony subsection, namely blessing number 14, not leaving our work undone. So today's session will run to about an hour and 10 minutes, starting with a 20-minute talk on the sort of things that cause us to procrastinate in our lives, then 30 minutes of meditation and 20 minutes to explain strategies for non-prevarication in our worldly and spiritual tasks. Like many other faith traditions, since Buddhism is not a religion to tolerate laziness, you could say it supports a work ethic. Even if you have already fulfilled all the blessings in the family harmony subsection by cherishing your parents, children and spouse, if you neglect to be lively in earning a living, money troubles will eventually lead to family infighting. From a financial point of view, it is necessary to devote oneself to earning one's living in order to support one's children, to have a legacy to pass on to one's children, to support one's spouse and cherish one's parents. In Buddhism, to work hard is seen as a way to repay one's debt of gratitude for the considerable time, money, education, love and patience invested in our upbringing by our parents, teachers and state. If we weren't to put our skills into action, then all that investment would go to waste. This is why in Buddhism, a lazy person would also be seen as an ungrateful person. Some people with the best of education and experience make no impact on their work if they never get round to doing it. Laziness is not the only reason for procrastination, however. In recent academic studies, it turns out that the reason people don't get round to doing things, even when they know it is a good idea, can often be much more elaborate. Some people procrastinate out of fear of being judged for lack of ability. Such people lack confidence about their ability and would rather be seen to fail in a task because of lack of available time than because of lack of ability. Consequently, their rush at the last minute makes a perfect excuse for slipshod workmanship. Some people procrastinate out of perfectionism. If a person has been brought up with a fear of appearing to try too hard or being a goody-goody, they might procrastinate so that if the results come out well, it can be put down to a fluke. Some people procrastinate out of the misconception that work expands to fill the time available. Some people are so disorganized they feel they have no control over the time they spend on any task. Therefore, they leave the main task to the last minute in order to allow themselves to fit in other minor tasks beforehand. The final results of the main task will be rushed and substandard, though. Some people procrastinate out of resentment of control, for example, when a person doesn't like their boss. Here, procrastination serves as a way to give power to the underdog by saying, "Get off my back," as a sort of game where they try to remind others that they are being taken for granted, often when the person is not assertive enough to say no directly. Lastly, some people procrastinate to control distance in relationships, often to make another person more or less reliant on them. Whatever the reason, the Buddha taught that procrastination, either in worldly or spiritual work, will limit one's ability to earn one's living, and the result will be to destroy harmony in one's family life. As a fun way to explain the psychology of procrastination, Tim Urban's blog called Wait But Why proposed a difference between what goes on in the heads of those more or less prone to procrastinate. For a non-procrastinator, there is a rational decision maker firmly at the wheel in the brain. However, in the procrastinator's brain, there are a couple of extra sidekicks in the guise of the instant gratification monkey and the panic monster. For as long as there's no pressure, the procrastinator puts the instant gratification monkey at the wheel of the brain, living in the present moment and caring only about what is easy and fun. In other words, things that have very little to do with making sense in life. Any thoughts of guilt, dread, anxiety, and self-hatred about unfinished work are forgotten. The only thing the monkey will listen to is the panic monster. Luckily, the panic monster is dormant most of the time, but he suddenly wakes up any time a deadline gets too close or there's danger of public embarrassment, a career disaster, or some other scary consequence. When the panic monster wakes up, the monkey will then relinquish the wheel to the rational decision maker. So, if you have a deadline to work to as a potential procrastinator, it would just be the case of looking out for the monkey and artificially setting milestones to wake up the panic monster occasionally. Unfortunately, for many of the most important things in our lives, like seeing your family, exercising and taking care of your health, or working on a relationship, or getting out of a relationship, or even meditating, there are no imposed deadlines. Sometimes with these things, if we haven't done the groundwork to build up the momentum to get these things moving, then the panic monster mechanism won't help to shake us out of complacency. Because in all these non-deadline situations, the panic monster doesn't show up. It's this long-term kind of procrastination that's much less visible and dramatic than the short-term deadline-based kind. It's usually suffered quietly and privately. It can be the source of huge amounts of long-term unhappiness and regrets. It's that long-term procrastination that can make you feel like a spectator at times in your own life. You'll be left with the frustration that you couldn't achieve your dreams, mostly because you never got round to even chasing them. So remember, the instant gratifications monkey's sneakiest trick is complacency when the deadlines just aren't there. When we talk about leaving work undone, we would generally mean the sort of work that puts the food on the table, since we cannot survive without an honest means to feed ourselves and our families. Nevertheless, families can't survive by bread alone. They also need to be nurtured spiritually. Therefore, we need to consider the danger of delaying to provide nourishment both for the body and the mind. Therefore, for the blessing of not leaving one's work undone means avoiding prevarication both in terms of physical and spiritual work. So, if we know our worldly and spiritual work is so important, why would we want to neglect it? Some people in an office get a reputation for leaving a backlog of work. Every piece of unfinished work can be easily tracked down to that person's inbox. Meanwhile, their out tray remains empty and gathers dust. The same is true for students who always leave their exam revision to the last moment. Work left undone has been ungenerously compared to dung accumulating on a pig's tail. And in the Buddhist context, the value of a person is often considered proportional to the amount of work they manage to complete. The work they leave undone detracts from their value. As we said earlier, the reason for the neglect is often not laziness, but for as many as 4 different reasons: wrong timing, wrong technique, never getting started, or not making a genuine effort. So for the first reason of leaving one's work unfinished has to do with wrong timing, which may mean doing the work at the wrong time or with the wrong timing. For example, if you plow a field out of season, weeds will choke the bare soil before you manage to sow your crops, which would illustrate being rushed into things that don't require it. An opposite illustration would be delaying in things that should have been finished long ago. For example, passing up the opportunity to study as a child and later struggling with school when you're too old to remember anything. It's the same for people who wait until they're old before becoming interested in training the mind. More haste, less speed is valuable advice for work like using a potter's wheel, and also for meditation, where the ultimate of patience needs to be developed and where it is rare to hear about overnight success except in very exceptional circumstances. Time is also wasted when you rush into something and end up making mistakes. Often it's better to do something cautiously so that you can get it right from the start. If you can first recognize the nature of the work you're doing in terms of timing, you can press on to completion without disparaging obstacles. Second reason for leaving work undone has to do with using the wrong technique. One example of doing things by wrong technique would be trying to work individually when the task requires teamwork, such as, let's say, lifting a heavy object. Another example might be dividing up your time wrongly, perhaps getting bogged down in the first of 10 questions on an examination paper. The result of poor technique is that you run out of motivation to do the work at all. Third reason for leaving work undone has to do with never getting started. Apart from all the managerial reasons for prevarication I've already mentioned, one extra reason some people don't get round to things is that they are waiting for the auspicious time by studying horoscopes. Although this sort of worldview might appear a little bit archaic, you should be aware of such superstitious thinking nonetheless, as it often goes hand in hand with those who believe in fate and luck, especially gamblers. In fact, later on today, I have a study to illustrate how such thinking affected an important decision. Meditators, however, are those who take their destiny into their own hands and don't wait for astrologers to organize their lives for them. Any time when you get around to doing good deeds, then the simple fact of getting down to doing it would be auspicious in itself. If you want to know whether it's the auspicious time to do something or not, don't waste money to consult a fortune teller, but instead use your powers of observation and experience to see whether you're ready and prepared to do the task in hand. If, in your estimation, you are ready to do something, then there is a good chance that getting started will yield success. The final reason for leaving one's work undone has to do with not being genuine in one's efforts. Mostly these involve the playground of the instant gratification monkey and cause you to get your priorities wrong. Instead of realizing how important your work is, you get distracted by food, sleep, intoxicants, romance, gambling, entertainment, bad friends, laziness, or incompatible working hours. To overcome obsession with food, you might need to go on a meditation retreat where you're forced to eat food all mixed up together or eat only one meal a day. To overcome obsession with sleeping, you may need to train yourself to sleep on a less luxurious bed. To overcome obsession with intoxicants, in other words, you're dealing with an addiction to alcohol, tobacco, or recreational drugs, you might need to abstain completely from consuming these substances rather than just moderating your intake. To overcome obsession with romance, you may need to spend less time obsessing over your dating life. To overcome obsession with entertainment, you need to realize that you can become as much a junkie for soaps or sport as you can for intoxicants. To overcome obsessions with gambling, you may need to confess your addiction to a sponsor and voluntarily restrict your access to credit cards. To overcome obsession with bad friends, you need to avoid getting in with people who idolize laziness, picking more diligent role models instead. Even if your efforts seem to be disrupted by pure laziness, laziness itself can be deconstructed into having too many excuses for everything, where work is concerned. If it's not too hot to work, then it's too cold. If it's not too early to work, then it's too late. Therefore, if you skip the excuses, you can usually skip the laziness at the same time. Lastly, your inability to put a genuine effort into work may boil down to incompatible working hours. This is not the same as being interested in sleeping, but may disrupt the efforts you make in work because you work at a time that doesn't fit in with other people's schedule, and therefore you'll be fraught with inefficiency from lack of teamwork. So, just before we settle for some meditation today, we have a little time for a story, which today is a scriptural tale from the 4th Jataka about a poor man who, through diligence, was able to elevate himself from rags to riches. There once was a millionaire and his servant who were traveling in a cart in the middle of India. The servant was a poor man who is the protagonist of the story. The millionaire saw a dead mouse at the side of the road and pointed it out to his servant, saying, "If someone had proper principles of working as a salesman, even with such a dead mouse as this, he could set himself up in life quite easily." The servant immediately got down from the cart and allowed the millionaire to go home alone. He picked up the mouse, and because he knew a lot of people in the area, he selected a house where he knew a compassionate person who kept cats and took the mouse there. He knew that compassionate people won't kill mice, but at the same time their cat has to have something to eat every day. So he sold the mouse to the householder for a few cents. He used that few cents to buy some sugarcane juice from the people crushing the cane. He asked for another bucket of plain water. He took the water and the sugarcane juice to the gate of the city. There he waited until the flower gatherers from the palace came back from where they had been picking flowers outside the city wall all day. Of course, they were tired and thirsty as they came to the gates. He gave them a glass of plain water to drink first of all. After they had slaked their thirst, he gave them a second glass of sugarcane juice. The palace attendants didn't know how to pay the man, so each gave him a handful of jasmine flowers. The man took the flowers and sold them for a small profit. He thereby gained a little more money than before and bought some more sugarcane juice and collected a little more drinking water. He sold all of it to the flower gatherers on the second day and got enough money for a second round of sugarcane juice. Enough for the people collecting the firewood as well. People with the firewood drank the sugarcane juice and each left him with a bundle of firewood. He sold the firewood and got even more sugarcane juice. He kept his eyes and ears open and noticed that there had been a storm in the night. In the royal forest there were many broken branches and tree trunks all along the ground. He offered his services to the forest keeper to be the one to clear up the broken branches, and the forester agreed because he would be able to have an easy day. He therefore offered sugarcane juice to the children playing nearby, and the children cut and gathered all the broken branches together into a huge pile. He sold the branches as firewood to a potter and bought a big barrel. Where he had sold sugarcane by the bucket before, now he sold it by the barrel. He bartered sugarcane juice for flowers, firewood, and even grass fodder. One day a big caravan of traders arrived at the gate of the city with many hungry horses. He told the stable boys in the palace not to sell their fodder to anyone, and he sold his own fodder at a high price to the traders. It turned out that it wasn't enough, and they took the fodder from the palace to sell to them at the same high price so that everyone got a profit. He carried on working like this until before long he was able to put down a deposit on a trading ship. His ship kept trading until he had amassed a fortune of 100,000 kahapanas. In the end, he returned to the old millionaire who had been his former boss and presented him with 100,000, saying that all of his wealth had come from the policy of seeing benefit in a dead mouse. The millionaire was so impressed that he gave the man a fortune of 1,000,000 and also his daughter's hand in marriage. So, this story illustrates why diligence is highly prized in Buddhism. The Buddha even went as far as to say in the Dhammapada that diligence is the path to the deathless, whereas procrastination is the path of death. The diligent never die, but those who procrastinate are as good as already dead. Understanding this distinctly, those who are skilled in diligence rejoice in diligence and will be able to delight in the pasture of the noble ones. So now that we know a little bit more about the dangers of procrastination, let's take a few moments to cultivate our spiritual path with diligence by settling ourselves for 30 minutes of meditation, which today is a recent live recording of the inner light of the sun. If at this time you would like to find a comfortable sitting position for yourself as you listen to my guidance. So we start by finding a comfortable position for ourselves in the meditation. We're sitting on the floor, then we try to sit cross-legged with our right leg over our left leg, the right hand over the left hand, palms turned upwards and resting in our lap. Even if we're sitting on a chair, then we try to sit in a relaxed way. Sometimes it's better to avoid leaning against the backrest, but sitting in an upright position, a position of poise. And we adjust our sitting position so that we feel completely at ease. We close our eyes very gently if we haven't done so already. And breathe in gently and deeply to ourselves. When we breathe in, we may feel our chest expanding and our back straightening. And as we breathe out, we may feel that we are letting go of any negativity or problems with the out-breath. Again, we breathe in, taking in the cool, refreshing spring air, allowing it to refresh us from the inside. And after a few such breaths, we'll start to feel more ready for the meditation ahead. One of the most important parts of the meditation preparation is the way we close our eyes. We need to close our eyes as gently as possible, with our upper and lower eyelashes just touching lightly together. We never squeeze our eyes closed, and we avoid applying any force to our eyes. Our eyelids should feel as light as a feather. And we allow all the muscles around our eyes to relax as far as possible, as they are some of the most sensitive muscles in our body. If we're able to relax the muscles around our eyes, then all the other muscles in our body will follow suit. So we allow that tide of relaxation from around our eyes to spread downwards through our face. You might try putting a smile on our face, relaxing the muscles of our forehead, our cheeks, our chin, allowing them to be fully relaxed. And we spread the relaxation down through our neck to our shoulders, to both arms, to our hands, all the way down to our fingertips. And we allow the tide of relaxation to continue further on down through our torso, chest, trunk, abdomen. All the way down through our legs, to our feet and our toes. And examining each part of our body, if we feel any discomfort remaining or resulting from our posture, then we can make an adjustment now, so the blood can circulate freely throughout the body, and so we can minimize any possible aches or pains during the meditation. To the point that we feel we could sit like this for as long as we liked. And when we feel the whole body is totally relaxed, we'll feel as if our body is light in weight, hollow like a tube, with no internal organs, just hollow and light, as if our whole body we're floating in the air, or as if our whole body were expanding, light in weight, expanding outwards to the horizon, as if our whole body were merging with the atmosphere around us. Little by little, our body disappearing, until we feel no physicality of our body anymore. And we turn our attention now to relax the mind. Normally our mind is filled with so many thoughts, so many worries. But for now we put each of these thoughts and worries to one side, leaving us with an empty mind, like a person with no future and no past, where all you have is the present moment, the here and now. And you might imagine that you're sitting all alone in a vast space, and all around you is nothing and no one. And if your mind drifts away onto some other thoughts, then just let the thoughts settle and remain in this silence for a few moments. And at this point we breathe in really slowly and make a mental note of the turning point of our breath, somewhere inside our stomach. And once we've taken note of that turning point of the breath, we can forget about our breath from here on in. It's just that the turning point of the breath inside our stomach is the very center of the body. It's a place where we would prefer to relocate the focus of our attention. It's a place that we're going to rest our awareness right here in the center of the stomach. In practice, it doesn't really matter exactly where we place the mind, at least in the beginning, because once our mind is calm and refined enough, the mind will zero in on the exact center of the body all by itself. So for now we might conjure up in the mind some sort of bright, imaginary object, maybe like a picture of the sun shining, a full moon, a star, perhaps a diamond, or even the feeling that one of those objects is present in the mind, even if we can't see it, but we can feel its presence by its weight or its texture. And we allow that object to settle, gravitate down gently to that point at the turning point of the breath, or the most comfortable point for us inside the area of our stomach. Once it aligns itself properly, you'll have a feeling almost as if something is alive at the center of the body. But for the time being, we just rest in the mind gently in the general area of the center of the stomach, the point which feels the most comfortable for us. The way we place our awareness at the center of the body should be as gentle as if you were floating a needle on the surface of some water. It's about the same sort of gentleness that we need when placing the mind gently at the center of the body. But to help to keep the mind in place, we maintain that image of the bright object, or the feeling of the presence of such an object at the center of ourselves. Picture rather like the sun on the horizon, shining bright, clear and round, visualizing without making any effort. Because after all, it's our natural ability of the mind to picture things internally. Whatever we think of, then that picture will arise in the mind. It's the way we visualize. So it can be something like the shining sun at the center of the body, even if it's not as clear in our mind's eye as only we see it with our real eyes. We can still work with it. Even if it's just a feeling, then we can also work with that as well. The important thing is the continuity, maintaining that inner object as continuously as we can for as long as we can, without letting the mind wander away anywhere else. And in order to dispel any thoughts that return to our mind, we do our best to ignore them. If it doesn't work for us, we can always make use of the traditional mantra, hearing the sound of the words, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang. The sound of the mantra coming up from the center of that bright inner object. The sound of the mantra being soft, tender, soothing to the mind. Until in our mind there's only two things remaining: the inner object at the center of ourselves and the sound of that mantra, if necessary, coming up from the center of the object. We repeat the sound of the mantra in a gentle, unhurried way, effortlessly. We repeat the mantra for as long as we need to, until at a certain point the mantra itself will fade away of its own accord. If you start to feel the mind is calm, doesn't wander anymore, then we don't need to restart with the mantra again. We just rest the awareness at the center of the inner object. Do we notice that the sun is drifting away into random thoughts? We just gently bring it back to the center of that inner object as before. Going back to the mantra if necessary. The longer we can rest the mind gently at the center of the body, the more refined our mind will become. Little by little becoming calmer and calmer, more and more refined, softer, more peaceful, And we remain with this inner moment of peacefulness in the mind for a few moments longer. The notional illumination from inside that comes with our inner object is rather like a touch-sensitive switch at the center of the body. If we touch the switch gently enough, then the illumination comes on. In fact, the illumination is always there already, but rather like the sun, it can sometimes be hidden behind a cloud, meaning that we're unable to see it. The light in the mind is sometimes blocked by any impurities within the mind. Sometimes to the extent that we may never know that there is light within our own bodies and minds. But through meditation we can gradually remove all those impurities from the mind, allowing the light of the inner sun to shine through, brighter and clearer than before. So we rest the mind at the center of the body, lightly, gently, continuously, until we can feel that sense of inner peace flowing outward from the center of the body, shining outwards continuously as we apply the mind with the utmost gentleness, never using any pressure, never using any force, never in a hurry. Allowing that stream of peacefulness and happiness to flow forth from the center, while we observe like a neutral observer, as if we were just observing the view from a bus window, keeping track of the country scenery. The scenery may change, but we keep watching impassively. And the longer we can gently rest the mind while observing at the center of the body, the more refined the mind will become. And in this sense, the mind will make a start on a journey inwards all by itself. A journey inwards into the center of the center, as the mind becomes more and more refined, as we engage and connect with that deeper sense of happiness within, flowing forth, cleansing the body and mind, until we feel that both body and mind are being purified somehow by a special kind of energy from within. For now, we continue to let the mind make that inward journey of its own accord, while we observe neutrally at the center of ourselves, each to our own practice in silence for a few more moments now, until we come to the appropriate time. Continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body the whole of the time. If our attention wanders away onto other things each time we realize, we just bring our attention back again to the center of the body as before. If the inner object disappears, we can think of a new one. If it changes, we just follow it in its new form. There's no need for us to change it back again. If thoughts occur in the mind, then we do our best to ignore them. If they are too persistent to ignore, then we may make use of that mantra. But in the meantime, we allow the mind to rest gently at the center of the body, noticing that sense of happiness from within that refreshes and energizes the mind, leaving us with a feeling of being awake and alive. And if we place our awareness very gently at the center of this feeling or this inner illumination, you'll notice that this inner kind of happiness is something that we can allow to spread outwards from the center by a process known as the spreading of loving kindness. We can extend that loving kindness initially to the whole of ourselves, allowing that feeling or inner brightness to pervade the whole of our own body with good wishes, before allowing it to spread further around us, outwards to everyone, resting the mind at the center of the body, but allowing the radius of our loving kindness to extend further and further outwards into the atmosphere, in all directions all around, with the wish that all living beings be well and happy, free from suffering. We extend that sense of loving kindness further still, outwards to neighborhood, town, city, county, country, the whole continent, outwards to cover the whole world, with the wish that all living people, all beings in the world be happy, free from suffering, free from illness, extending the loving kindness further outwards into space, toward all the stars and galaxies, filling the whole universe with loving kindness and happiness originating from the center of ourselves. We may even cast that same positive energy towards loved ones of ours, those still living, those who already have passed on, with the wish they all be well and happy. They will have the opportunity to discover the same inner peace and happiness that we are now experiencing. So we continue to make good wishes for ourselves and for others, while spreading loving kindness in this way for the last few moments of our meditation together. Sappa Buddhanupavena, Sappa Dhammanupavena, Sappa Sankhānupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for today, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gently finishing your practice. So to come back gently to our subject matter for today, we will start to examine some strategies for non-prevarication. To be successful in whatever you do, it's important to do it at the right time, in the appropriate way, and get round to doing it, and finally to do it enthusiastically and conscientiously. The qualities to aim for to be successful at work are elaborated upon in the Samyutta Nikaya's Alavaka Sutta. The first quality it mentions is approaching work in the appropriate way, or in the Pali language, patirupakari. In other words, we need to put into practice all the knowledge and craftsmanship we have learned in Blessings 7 and 8. When you are new to a job, then you have to learn from any mistakes. You shouldn't make the same mistake more than once, if you observe your own performance carefully. Secondly, you need to conjure up the willingness to work and to challenge your own previous ability, or turawa in the Pali language. This would mean never looking down on tasks, no matter how humble. Lastly, you need to have a certain keenness and quickness in the way you work to keep yourself enthusiastic, lively, and active, or as it is referred to in the Pali language, uttata. If you know you have a tendency to lethargy, then maybe you should take up a sport. Success in one's job will be attained more easily if one is able to put into practice the following 4 principles found in the Digha Nikaya's Sangiti Sutta, amongst other places, and called the 4 foundations of power or success, or Itipatha, and which in effect are appropriate to ensure success in any sort of work, worldly or spiritual. And I'll come back to these spiritual applications in just a moment. In your day job, the Itipatha would be applied in 4 stages. First comes initial motivation, or chanta, which means that with work you need to have the willingness to get down to do the work. Without this, you will never make a start. Second comes initial application, which might be referred to in Pali as virya, or when we come to meditation, Jataka. So what this tells us is that having conjured up the motivation, the next thing which you need to have is actually to apply yourself to the work in the proper way, starting as you mean to go on. This often means achieving an optimal balance between productivity and enjoyment. Third comes sustained application, which might be referred to in Pali as citta, or in the context of meditation, vichara. This means that starting out well is not enough, but you have to be able to be consistent in your good work if you're able to succeed in eventually bringing the task to completion. Like learning to swim, you might feel awkward and unskilled on the first day in the pool, but if you keep it up, one day you might make Olympic champion. Lastly, true success requires retrospective analysis, or vimamsa. This means that you need to go back over your work and give yourself feedback by looking for even better and more efficient ways to do the same task in the future. You need regularly to examine your own performance, remedying your weaknesses as quickly as possible, so that they no longer impede your worldly progress. If you experience success, you should remember the reasons for your success so that you can apply it on future occasions. If you can follow these 4 simple principles in your professional life, success will be just around the corner. So we turn now from worldly work to look at spiritual work of nourishing the mind, heart, and soul. The dangers of neglecting this work in our lives may be even more harmful than lazing around in the house instead of earning a living, because, as the Buddha pointed out in the Akkamaniya Sutta, I do not perceive even one other thing that, when left undeveloped and uncultivated, entails such great suffering as the mind. The mind, when undeveloped and uncultivated, entails great suffering. It would therefore appear that we need to apply our Itipata, or recipes for success, as energetically to our meditation practice as we do to our work life. And luckily, in this respect, the Itipata teachings readily adapt themselves to the context of meditation. There are 5 components equivalent to the Itipata as applied to not leaving your work undone in the context of meditation, namely, and I try to get them all to start with the letter C for ease of remembering: conducive, comfort, conscious, consistent, and checking. The first step of your meditation requires conduciveness or willingness to cultivate clarity of mind. This is equivalent to the initial motivation for worldly work. For spiritual practice, it is essential to have that sense of willingness to cultivate oneself. Sometimes, rather than waiting for the inclination to meditate to arise accidentally, you need to look for ways to put yourself in the mood. You might generate the enthusiasm by reading up on the benefits of meditation, or perhaps seeking out a nearby meditation group where you can have the moral support of meditating in company. You'd also take care to create the ideal conditions to attract you to have a good meditation, whether it be selecting the best time of the day, practicing in a conducive activity beforehand like showering or exercise, or creating a quiet and conducive corner for meditation in your home, or investing in an especially comfortable meditation cushion. The second factor for success in meditation, which is the equivalent to initial application in a worldly job, is the twin track of comfort and consciousness. In other words, we need to maintain focus in our meditation alongside a feeling that we are comfortable with what we are doing. Comfort can be understood as accepting yourself as you are. Comfort can be achieved by physical relaxation, especially concerning sitting position, clothing, and the way you close your eyes. Comfort is also achieved by relaxation of the mental state, treating each session as if it were the first time we've meditated. Comfort of the mind means keeping our emotions positive and stable, both during our meditation and also in our daily life. The second part of mental comfort is the gentleness with which we place our attention at the center of the body. The flip side of comfort, but something which we need to keep it in balance with, is the quality of being conscious or focusing in our meditation. This mostly concerns the way we conjure up or observe the object of meditation, which might mean the center of the body, our visualization, or the mantra. If we're able to maintain a balance between comfort and consciousness, we'll be able to obtain a peaceful and progressive meditation experience. So what we have said up to this point is that we need to maintain the relaxed and alert quality in our meditation so that comfort and consciousness can go hand in hand, almost like the parallel tracks of a dirt road or the twin tracks of a railroad. In either case, if we go off the tracks or slip off the road, then we get bogged down in the dead end, where the effort we put in will be unrewarded. Your wheels will be spinning, but you will be getting nowhere fast. If you're on a dirt road, then you need a tractor to come and get you out. If you go off the rails, well, that speaks for itself. So what I'm saying is that step 3 of our Itipata for meditation is just to keep the balance between comfort and conscious going without falling by the wayside. And this is the quality of consistency. Or if we come back to our comparison, we can see it would be considered as sustained application in the workplace, or pacing ourselves so we don't burn ourselves out before we reach the finishing line. More concretely, in meditation, this may be supported by establishing a routine to meditate every day, but it would also concern keeping the balance going all day long and practicing mindfulness by maintaining the mind at the center of the body throughout the day. So, after we place our mind gently at the center, as shown by the blue cross, we would need to be consistent in maintaining our balance of comfort and consciousness going, that twin track between ease and focused, relaxation and alertness, without slipping too far in either direction. If we err too much on the side of comfort, our meditation will drift off into sleepiness or distraction. If we err too much on the side of consciousness, in other words, we are too forceful in the way that we focus, then we will drift off into either tension or trying to preempt the results. If we notice we've slipped off the beaten track or gone off the parallel rails of comfort and consciousness, we shouldn't hesitate to place the mind again and do a restart without worrying that it's a waste of our effort so far. In this way, our mind will gradually make its way further and further down the twin tracks until we can hit upon the golden states of mind we're aiming for, which we refer to as inner experience. The final aspect of the recipe for success in meditation is checking or constructive retrospective evaluation of your practice. It means going back over our meditation, usually after we've finished the practice, to make sure there's not a better way that we could do it next time round. Being systematic in the way we check back over our meditation will have the advantage of helping us to remember our experience, renewing our inspiration, giving us an overview of our progress, lending preciousness to the passing experience, making sure meditation doesn't become a chore, allowing us to pick up on changes too subtle to notice from one day to the next, and completing the loop of quality control in our meditation. It will also help us to clear up any doubts about our meditation practice. The main things we need to ask ourselves repeatedly when checking back over our meditation is whether our body was truly comfortable, what were the techniques that led to good experiences, and what were the things that seemed to hold us back. So, in summary, for success in our meditation, we apply the Itipata in the form of the 5 C's, namely conducive, comfort, conscious, consistent, and checking. For today, we still have time for a quick story to finish off with, and the story concerns the perils of putting off an important task because of superstitious beliefs in auspicious timing. There once was a man from a family near Savatthi who intended to marry a lady from the same city. Having fixed a day to come and fetch the bride, he subsequently consulted a fortune-teller who was familiar with his family as to whether the stars were favorable for holding the festivities that day. The fortune-teller was indignant that the couple had fixed a date for the wedding without asking him first, so he thought, I'll teach them a lesson. So the fortune-teller made up the prediction that the stars were not favorable for marrying on the appointed day, and the nuptials ought not to be celebrated that day, and that if they were, for some reason, celebrated on that day, then great misfortune would come of it. And the man believed the fortune-teller and decided not to turn up for his own wedding. Now the bride's friends in the town had made all the preparations for celebrating their nuptials, and when they saw the groom's family did not turn up, the bride, who had waited and waited, eventually thought it was the groom who decided the wedding date, and yet they have not turned up. We have gone to considerable expense for the arrangements, so let us marry the girl to someone else. So they found another bridegroom and gave the girl to him in marriage with all the festivities they had already prepared. The bride availed herself of the whole dowry in compensation for the groom having broken the marriage contract. And on the new date the fortune-teller had given them, the groom's party came to fetch the bride, but the people of Savatthi berated them with the words, "You country folk are a bad lot. You fixed the day yourselves and then insulted us by not coming. We have married the bride to someone else." So this is the origin of the Buddhist advice that if you are ready to start an activity, that readiness itself is all you need to propitiate success in the activity. In other words, you don't need a fortune-teller to tell you whether success will be achieved on a certain date or not. And if you do persist in superstitious beliefs, then you, like the gullible groom, may lose everything you had prepared for. So this session I have introduced you to blessing number 14 on not leaving the work undone. For my next live session online, which will, fingers crossed, be a week on Sunday morning, I'll move on to blessing 15 about generosity, which explains how generosity can contribute to becoming a pillar of society. For good measure, I would like to remind viewers that you can email your questions about meditation or what you've heard in the lecture to the email address that you can see spelled out in the slide. I'll do my best to answer these on my next session. In the meantime, try to stay healthy, avoid recklessness or complacency in the face of the virus, maintain a positive mood, speak only positive words, forgive others, extend good wishes to others, and meditate daily. Hopefully, as a result of today's session, you will be less tempted to prevaricate about your worldly and spiritual work. So for today, this is me, Phra Nicholas, signing off for now. So long, folks, and stay safe.